This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast with Greg Smith and Jay Foreman. Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hurrdat Media Network. I am Greg Smith. You're still recovering from too much mac and cheese, friend.
I am Jay Foreman. You're fully recovered from 4 Long Island iced tea drinking self after Thanksgiving. My head is pounding right now.
Man, you out here doing it. You said you were going to drink. You did say that.
Yeah, I don't know, even though there wasn't even a reason. You know what I mean? I celebrated like Nebraska won on Saturday or Friday.
That'll get you.
Well, I'm trying to change up the routine. Now it's just desperation, right? Usually you drink a celebratory drink, then you drink the sorrow drinks. Now you're just trying to enact, that we won, and then hopefully the next week they'll win.
And then you're just trying to forget.
Then you're just trying to forget, right?
Trying to forget. Yeah, it was. I mean, we're going to get into that, but yeah, it was something because I came away kind of confused yet almost encouraged, and we'll get into that because I wanted to talk your thoughts on that because I feel like I go back and forth on how to feel after that, but I want to start off though with something also from the game in our Coach Speaks segment.
Coach Speak to Real Talk.
Well, we go through something that somebody said, and we kind of talk about what they really meant. And this week comes courtesy of Nebraska starting quarterback from this past week, Adrian Martinez, who spoke after the game about kind of playing with a chip on his shoulder. And he said, quote, "It kind of helped me with my mindset, I'd say. Also continuing to try and do the right things the right way and to be sharp and detailed. Regardless of whether I'm the starter, the backup, or whatever role I have on this team, I want to be the best leader, the best captain and teammate I can possibly be. So I think it put some things in perspective for me and allowed me to approach practice and each day with a better mindset."
I mean, that's good. That's good to say, but I'm looking at it a little bit deeper. Like, what have you been doing for 2 years? You get
that
what I'm
was
saying?
the thing that I thought of too.
What have you been doing for 2 years? That's number one. And who's been letting you do it for 2 years, right? This is the funny thing about coaches and players, and this is what I think since you've been in those media rooms and I think your upbringing with your parents, you kind of can read between the lines, right? And me being there and sometimes have said some of those quotes and really know what I was really thinking, trying to massage it a little bit. I don't think the average fan knows how to do that, right? Yeah. And these are sometimes cringeworthy. When you hear the ones after Illinois game saying, "Oh, we didn't try as hard as practice, and now we're trying."
Yeah, we weren't fully running routes and all of that,
dropping routes, and the energy wasn't good. That's cringeworthy. That's like fetal position worthy, right? This is a little bit cringeworthy, where you have a captain that's in year 3. Granted, he's still a young kid though, right?
Right.
I mean, let's face it. He didn't play his senior year in high school, right? Because he was injured. Right. And then you get here, and he's always kind of battled injuries, and then he's been thrust into a leadership role, and he really wasn't
totally comfortable with from the beginning.
Yeah,
he had to be pushed. No, it wasn't.
And so then he's kind of he's trying to be a leader, then he's still trying to figure out how to function in
how to do his job,
right. And then get better at his job, and then here comes the Heisman talk. But it's a little bit troublesome when you do have a specific coach to coach his position, right? And even Coach Frost said it at the end of the season last year, where there were some things that slipped through the cracks as far as details, being as focused and knowing the system, we were talking about. And he took a little bit of the blame for it. And then obviously it was on Adrian as well. And obviously it came to light when, they played Iowa last year and he ran out of bounds. And if you could have had a chance to go into overtime, right? Out of a timeout. Now he's talking, where he has a chip on his shoulder and it maybe, helped him refocus, which is great. But what it's telling you is there's still that little piece missing there. But, that's right. That's probably where I was looking more of the spotlight at, who's been kind of watching him for 2 years and letting it go on. Because I think that ideally, when you look at I always reference Nick Saban, but if you look at a Nick Saban or a Dabo Swinney, they're probably the hardest on their quarterbacks those first 2 or 3 years that they're in their kind of system, getting them used to the culture, getting them used to the attention to detail, how hard you have to work, how much you have to sacrifice, how much you got to make them earn it. Nick Saban is famous for de-starring the guys the first few months that they're there, first year, let them earn them stripes. If that didn't really happen, you're kind of learning that on the fly. And really, now you're seeing Adrian kind of mature a little bit when you had liked it the year before.
A year before, yeah. If this quote had happened a year before, I think it's more celebrated as a whole versus, okay, it's good, but
we're 7 weeks into your third season, and it's COVID and all that. But, look, whenever the light can come on, fully come on, you definitely, be okay with it. I think him getting benched was a eye-opening experience for him. I don't think he's a finished product by any means, but you saw a different quarterback than you saw majority of last year in the first few games this year. He was he looked more detailed. His decision making looked a little bit more sped up, and he was more of a factor. And he wasn't out there. He was playing to win the game and not lose.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, too, that you saw some of the commentary that I saw on social media during the game about when he would go back to pass and he would either pull it fairly early or maybe after one read, and people would say, oh, he's still tentative. I give him a little bit of slack on that because if you think about, and I just had a thought about it after the game, like if the offensive line had another not-so-great game, they've been shuffling in and out at wide receiver, and you got guys that don't fully know what they're doing, and by their admission, guys that weren't fully running routes a week ago, so we're still obviously some type of work in progress.
Right.
You don't have your starting running back, which was the guy that was kind of your dependable player in that room, and you're shuffling guys in and out there. So if everything around the quarterback is crumbling, and then you're expecting him to be something that he's not been able to be yet so far, especially this year, then that's tough. That's a really tough position. And sometimes I cringe a little bit like last year a lot when you hear Frost say stuff like, oh, it's not just a quarterback, it's not just Adrian like other guys. And I'm like, okay, that's really just coach speak.
You see
but
it
then now you really see the difference of what he's actually talking about.
But then also and now it's actually what Scott's quotes are actually coming to fruition now. But I will say this: is it circumstances or are you creating it? Right? Because here's why I'm going to say this. Right? Circumstances: Dedrick Mills being hurt. Right? And then you have young guys that just have never played. They're either true freshmen or redshirt freshmen. With Johnson and obviously Scott. Right? So they just they're learning every time, and so I'd like to see them run more, but you're kind of limited on how much you can, give them. What you create is when you're out there, and this is no knock on any of these guys, but when you have Oliver out there, Levi Flack, and Cade Warner, you're not scaring nobody, right? So then it all falls back on the quarterback to somehow make these guys become faster and create separation. That's not going to happen. So it doesn't matter if he goes from the first read and starts pulling it because the second and third read isn't open, right? And they're not putting any fear, and they're allowing the other team to dictate what he has to do, right? And so I'm okay with that because at least he's trying to make plays. Now, what I'd like to see is more bets, and then obviously the guys that have chosen to stick around. I don't know if we're going to get into that. When you got a Fleming just 3 weeks ago have 76 yards, now he's in the transfer portal, and Delancey.
Well, he's not in there yet. We're as of 9/12. I don't think he's officially in there. But it does not look good. I would say.
Well, I thought that I'd heard he was, but I kind of.
Listen, news changes quick around here.
Right. One jumped in, then you thought the other one jumped in, then you had to decommit. I got kind of a little confused. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is the speed on the field will help him become a more effective playmaker. Now, at times, I will say this, the offensive line's protection was actually really, really good.
Yeah, there were
times that I felt like Adrian it seemed like he had 4 or 5 seconds to find a receiver. There was nobody open. Right. There was nobody getting open. There's nobody actually
outside of Wandale because he had a really nice game. That was probably, I think, one of his best games and overall how they used him. He got to play receiver. Right. I really like what they did with him last
You need 4 more Wandale Robinsons. You would like the passion. You like if you had all 11 of those guys on offense, or say 15, if your top say 20 guys, played like Wandale, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Right.
We'd be talking about are we going to Indianapolis or wherever the Big Ten championship is at. So when he has that much time and he had a clean pocket, he's looking. I saw him go from 1, 2, 3. You know what these guys don't do? They don't break off their routes. Right. They don't do anything besides just doing their job or just doing the initial route. You
and
get
I
what I'm
wonder
saying?
if part of that is all of the shuffling in, all
It
of the
is.
like the newness and all of that. And part of like not having spring ball, like a lot of that does come into it.
It does.
The problem is that when you start saying that stuff, it honestly starts to just sound like excuses.
Because
and I
everybody else has
understand
it,
that
though.
because everybody else is dealing with that stuff too, or is dealing with something within their group, and it's almost to the point to where on the offense that you almost need Adrian to be like his the fifth year senior finished product, like he is steady Eddie, but he's just not there yet because you need that type of guy to compensate for what's going on around there.
Yeah, he can't be there because number one, they don't have a true conventional running attack. If you look back at Joe Burrow, look at Fields last year, and even this year. They have a legitimate running attack. I know Ohio State is still working through who's going to be their bell cow, but you saw them last week, though, right? When they went against Indiana, when they wanted to seal the game, they're going to line up and pound you, right? You look at LSU last year. You know, they had a legit running attack, and they had obviously other skill positions to obviously make the offense go. We don't have a conventional running attack, so then therefore everything else you can't really run play action. The defenses really don't have to really worry about you really running the ball. They can hone in on quarterback run game, right? And then our passing game is short at most, and our only really deep threats are our tight ends. I mean, the catch by Allen on the sideline, that was how did it not get on all these different networks as the catch of the day?
Yeah, that was a great catch.
So we have to do a better job of evolving as an offense, and that means if we have to run, I wouldn't say two type of offenses when certain personnel is in, but you got to have more adjustments on it, right? So there was one play that when Iowa blitzed, you could tell that, one guy was running wide open, but Nebraska doesn't have any sight adjustments, which is for you people out there is like if you're having trips to a side, or if you have a slot like 11 personnel and you have an open side with the slot receiver and they see the slot guy about the blitz, he's the hot guy or whoever would be the hot guy. We don't really have a lot of that, or maybe if we do, I haven't seen it.
Let's break that down.
You get what I'm saying?
That's a great point, because I'm trying to picture in my mind how many times you've seen Nebraska get blitzed and then the quarterback just hits that guy that came free because the blitzer was from that area.
You haven't seen
like, you just don't. I can't picture that.
Right, and you see it a lot of other places. And
you do.
And when you do that, that will lessen the likelihood to continue to get blitzed. If there's no side adjustments, there's no audibles that you're able to make at the line of scrimmage, and that's where maybe it's because of spring, maybe it's because obviously when you're shuffling a lot of freshmen in there, and they're playing a ton of young guys, so that this isn't an excuse. This is factual. How many young guys they're playing on the offensive line.
Yeah, basically every position has a young guy that's played, including quarterback, because Luke McCaffrey has been in as well.
So you can't have all that there, but at the end of the day, the only way that they're going to get good at doing it is you got to throw these guys in there. They're playing anyways, right? So if they're playing, you got to make them learn it on the fly. There's going to be mistakes with freshmen. There's going to be mistakes with sophomores. Heck, there might even be mistakes with juniors. But as they continue to play, that's why when I mention Farniak, right? You've played too many games for mistakes like that to get beat like a drum, a one-on-one pass blocking. One, because I know you're better. Number two, you've played too many times against these guys.
You played
against better competition to be there and get beat. Like, now, granted, an offensive lineman is almost like sometimes like a cornerback. You could play a clean game and get beat one time, then all of a sudden
that's all anybody is talking about.
Social media, you're horrible. Yeah. But up until this point, being a captain, he has not played his best football and hasn't been consistent. I wouldn't say he's the worst out there, but you need more consistency out of him, and that's what makes you a good leader. Every single day you bring it. Right. Every drill you bring it. Every time you do, you got to bring it, and you got to step up sometimes, even when you're having a bad game, and that's going to make everybody else have confidence. And so. It's a hard situation to be in for Nebraska to be at right now, especially with the coaching staff, because when you really, really think back to all the schedule and what our record is, the two big losses are Northwestern and Illinois. Mm-hmm. Okay, you go in Iowa. I think this is where people don't understand. How do you beat Iowa Well, you're going to have to be more of a dominant football team to beat them because they're not going to beat themselves, right? And so when we start beating Iowa, say like 6 out of 10 years or 5 out of 5, that's when we'll already have won 8, 9, 10 games.
Yeah, you've already had a good season to that point because the things you had to do to beat them, you had to do it. Yeah, you had to do it against some of those other teams as well.
And it's a hard thing for a young team to do, even a young coaching staff, right? Because this is only Scott's 5th year as being a head coach, 3rd year in the Power 5 against I call it big boy football, big boy coaches, right? To go from an embarrassed, I call it the lowest of the lows against Illinois, to bounce back on a short week, right? And go and beat a team that you have to line up and beat, right? Or you have to have it in a boxing match. I always say styles make fights. So when you think of like if Iowa was playing like a Purdue, or if they were, I wouldn't say Maryland because Maryland isn't, a dominant type team, but if they're playing like Ohio State this year, where they can do so many things outside of what Iowa wants them to do athletically, as far as spreading the field and making plays and getting deep on them, they can't dictate the pace to you. Right. See, with Nebraska, when Iowa plays Nebraska, they know we're not disciplined enough and we don't have enough as far as in our playbook that they can dictate what we do, what they do, and they can play downhill 24/7. You know what I'm saying? So until we get to that point, then we won't have the type of we only won 7 games this year. We're 7-5. That was a down year. Where we're 9-3 and 8-4 and 10-2. We get to 10-2, all that stuff, and beat Iowa. Even 50% of the time. And I even was at 4 out of 10 years. You're not even coming. Illinois is not even coming within 10 to 14 points of you. Right.
That's how you cover those spreads.
That's how you cover those spreads. That's how you win those games. That's how you pull out a victory against Northwestern on the road. That's how you're able to be a physical team and win in 4 minutes. You're not worried about how many points, which is I think 26 points in the total of the whole season in the second half. You're scoring points in the first half. You're scoring points in the third quarter coming out of the break, and you're able to score points or stop people from scoring points to end the game. It's not 4 minutes anymore. It's the last 6 minutes of the game. So those are the things that we need to do, and ultimately. Until we get there, then you're going to be an up and down team. We're a young team, so 1 week we're going to look good, right? So you look at the season. Ohio State, granted, the scoreboard wasn't indicative of how well they played, right? I think about a 6-minute span, they lost their way.
Yeah, with the fumble, scoop and score, and all that.
Coming out of the TV timeout and getting a delay or getting a penalty, and getting way behind the chains, punting. Going in instead of going in down 3, you go down 10. They score, fumble it. Now you're down 24. Just a matter of
it happened.
It happened quick,
blink of an eye. Yeah.
Then Northwestern was a little bit of a downer, I would think, as far as just overall how they played.
I didn't think they actually played that well against Northwestern, but they hung in the game, which shows you something else about the team
that they haven't had before, right? So they had that, and then here comes Illinois.
Well, Penn State.
Yeah. Okay, then you kind of like on the uptake, Penn State. The first half was excellent. Second half, you kind of like hung on, and you could kind of make the excuse, okay, look, this is a young team. We got to kind of coach them to a victory, and this victory will lead to a better performance next week. Look, we won the game. We dominated the first half. Penn State still put up yards against everybody. Even when they lost to Indiana, they dominated as far as like the yards and everything, right? Yeah. But Indiana just, players make plays. So that's an up, right? So you had one up. I would say the Northwestern is a little bit down. Yep. Okay.
I would agree.
And then I would say Penn State is a little bit – not all the way up, but on the uptake, right? Just because that first half was pretty good.
It was good.
Then you go out there against Illinois, a team that you should beat 9 out of 10 years.
Yes.
Okay. And that was a way downer, right? Then you come to Iowa, right? And I would say overall that was an up game because when you look at it, we dominated them in yards, rushing we beat them, passing we beat them or even. I won't even really look at the 2 turnovers because. The last turnover, I mean, he got it. I mean,
that's not his fault. Like nobody is like, what is he supposed? What's Adrian supposed to do?
He's passing and he gets hit in like 1.2 seconds. Yeah. And then the only really real turnover is on a punt return. So it had nothing to do with the offense, right? Yeah. The penalties were low, 4 for 40 yards. 40,
which I was actually surprised by. It
seemed like they had more.
It seemed like it was more, right? Yeah.
So you got to think that, so they cleaned up that stuff. They cleaned up the turnovers, right? You get what I'm saying? 2 big sores or just black eyes on this season. It was a huge amount of turnovers. Obviously, just the week before.
Yep.
0 to 5. We had turned it over 5 times, and penalties has always kind of been this dark cloud over the.
It's been like that, and it's really been like that since before Scott.
Before Scott got here, but the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think we against Penn State they were a little bit lower. Illinois didn't really matter, but they were a little bit lower. But this was a lot. I mean, which was pretty good. Yeah. And you know what? I'll take the first one. I'll take that first. I
knew when Reimer got that late hit out of bounds. I knew you would like that one.
Hey, you know what? You know what we used to call them? It's like that today penalty, right? Yeah. So it's just like that.
Which I can live with that. Which is funny too, because even if with that penalty, it took in that very first drive that penalty. Which listen, I'm with you. I'll throw it out and say, listen, we set in the tone. It took that and that miraculous one hand grab up the seam for them to even get in position. To get 3 points. That told me to start that game though that Nebraska was going to hang in. That would be a game that Nebraska would hang in.
So I can deal with that.
Yeah, and that's where I think though. But what you're saying, and I agree, is that all of this stuff is all related. So like all of the things that it would take to beat Iowa, and Scott kind of mentioned this after the game, is what it takes to beat Northwestern, which is the same thing that it takes to beat Wisconsin. Which is the same, like, you know what I mean? Like, so on and on down the line, that's what it takes in this league. And I do think that there's something to a young football team and a young coaching staff having to figure that out, because it's not just the players and it's not just on them. The coaching staff had to make an adjustment, I think, and I think this is maybe the most under talked about thing about this whole thing, and it's completely glossed over, is that this coaching staff, and it's not a knock on them at all, them coming from the AAC, where it's just fun and gun, wide open, we're having a good time, 50 to 45 football, to come into the Big Ten, where it is details, it is tackling, it's fundamentals,
it's coaching,
it's execution, it's coaching every single week.
And it's
like that all the time here. It's like that all the time.
It is. It's everything. It's gamemanship, as we saw with Kurt Ferentz and them. It's situational football. Mm-hmm. Right.
So the punts, remember, the punt that happened in the game when they leave it in the middle of the field and the guy gets them good field position. Right. Like those little things in this league will get you. Yeah.
Right. And I'm gonna tell you, I remember when Urban Meyer's Ohio State team came here. I was down on the sidelines, and you knew that they were going to beat Nebraska. He went berserk on their punter because it was a windy night that night or that day. And he smooth cussed this dude out because the punter wasn't playing the wind right. Uh-huh. He didn't miss a detail because he knew it wasn't just about this game, right? This is the tone that he's setting to play Michigan in a few weeks. Right. You get what I'm saying? And so really how Nebraska lost this game, really, when you think about everything, was on special teams, right? And special teams kind of goes with how they play, right? Yeah. Little uptake in one game. Really
it really is. It's all over the place.
Makes a little bit of strides. And in the last 2 weeks, our special teams have been horrible. And so the kicking game has been pretty good as far as punting. And obviously we got
the field goals are
we ain't did tryouts now, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
stop stealing my man's truck.
Right. I know, right? It's like somebody else got their car.
Yeah, there was another guy that got the car.
So it's like now we got to get the coverage units. And what we have to do, you got to start putting more emphasis on special teams. And it's a different type of kid now, and you have young kids now playing, right? You don't have the guys that have been through the grind, that have accepted being on special teams, that are out there showing the kids or telling them, if you want to play, you better cover these punts and you better be dependable on there. Because here's what's missing is, if you can't play one football play, that's what a kickoff is, a punt return, a kick return, kickoff, that's one, or field goal block, or a field. If I can't trust you for one, which in a lot of ways is an easy play, right? Not when say easy, it takes a good.
But there's not a lot. There's not a lot of different stuff that's going to happen.
There's not a lot of checks. There's not a lot of motions. Look, you're kicking the ball, you got to go get it, or you're blocking.
You're able to focus on your job and laser.
If I can't trust you to do one play and do it as hard as you can, don't you dare walk in my office talking about you need to play offense. Right. You get what I'm saying? And so that's where it's missing. And so these guys need to understand, and also the coaches need to understand, is you got to put emphasis on special teams, and it can't just be a thing to getting guys reps even when they're freshmen. I want guys. This is a football play.
Yeah.
And I remember when I played, all the starters were out there.
It's funny. I was thinking when you said that Iowa. Maybe it was pregame where they were talking about this. One of those two running backs. I think it's Sargent. Plays on their special teams because they said that he went to the coaches and said that he wanted to do that to be able to contribute to the team.
Right.
And I've watched some different stuff on Iowa's coaching staff, specifically on how they coach special teams. And they basically say that if you are not a quarterback or an offensive lineman, you're fair game to be on one of these special teams units and go cover some kicks or cover punts or whatever. And that's just the expectation from the beginning when you get there. That you know that could be how you end up helping. Even if you're one of the starting wide receivers, you might be out there doing that
on the gunner.
Which I think though it creates a mindset though that every detail is important on this football team. And I do think that that's something that Nebraska is having to make that adjustment on the fly, and it's hard in this league to do it.
Still, and it's I wouldn't say part of me thinks that I know they're getting better at it, right? Because they're slowly but surely fixing some stuff, the kicking game and stuff like that. Little part of me thinks that they're still fighting it.
Okay.
They're still I think they're still fighting it, that they think that they could get away with what they used to do in the AAC here. They're still the reality is right there. If I'm looking at that screen right now, that straight up breakdown by Hail Varsity screen, right?
Yeah, beautiful
screen, right? And I'm looking at it and I'm watching the game, but I'm in my mind I'm thinking, you know what, I could still do it my way. I coach kids that do that, man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? 14, 15-year-old kids. You got to play D and rebound. If you want to score more, you got to rebound. You got to move without the basketball. No, I can sit right here and he ain't. Yeah. And then I'm gonna hit a deep three like Steph Curry. Well, that might be once, but this is a 40-minute game. So I think just a tiny bit of that is because it's also what they're used to, and they're learning on the fly, and it's a super hard thing to do. And and I will say this is not an excuse, it's a reality. When you don't have spring ball, and you're kind of on the thin ice as far as what you could do in the off season, COVID, where you're not really to get in there and do. I think they should have did a little bit more self scout and really break down and get in these kids' heads. It's hard, and especially when you have a bunch of young kids, a bunch of young guys.
Yeah, because they have so much going on where they're just trying to think about it. And I do want to give all of those young players that are playing, especially those two freshmen, I think deserve additional credit for what's happening. Guys like Xavier Betts, Marvin Scott, these guys that are out there that are playing. And Betts got the start this weekend, got his first start of his career, many more to come. They've gone through a lot this season of whether or not you're from Nebraska, you're from Florida. In the case of those two kids, you're away from home, dealing with COVID, and you're trying to adjust to school. You're on this weird schedule of trying to figure everything out. It's got to be really difficult. It's already hard to come in that situation and be able to play. It has to be very difficult to do that. So I do think that they deserve credit for that. It's just that where they are, and a lot of those guys that are playing are, as far as their development and the patience that's needed, does not match up with where the program is right now, because it's in year 3 of trying to say, hey, this needs to be better. And it kind of leads me to, after all of that, and I think that we're both in agreement that there were things in that Iowa game that leave you encouraged. And I really think that if you saw this game in a vacuum, you would be like, okay, maybe they are starting to get these things fixed.
Right.
But when you take it in the totality of the whole 3 years, I don't know if you have that same feeling, or maybe you don't feel as good about that. So my question is that I don't know whether or not to feel encouraged coming out of that Iowa game, in that, yes, they lost again in another one-score game to Iowa, but it was in a little bit different way. But at the same time, it was not, because it was a self-inflicted wound with that muff punt that really led to that, because they were, down 3, getting the ball back in decent field position.
Yeah, you were right around the 50.
Yeah,
40,
and so I think maybe the 40.
Yeah.
And so those sorts of things are the same types of things that end up getting you the year before, when you don't go out of bounds and you give up a kickoff return and all of that. You had some of that same stuff the year before with turnovers and penalties. So I have now talked myself in another circle trying to figure out, I don't know if I should be encouraged or not by what we saw.
I will say this. A week from now, when we come in here and do this on Monday, I can answer that question. And I said it after Penn State. How they handle the game against Illinois will tell me a lot more than that win against Penn State.
Yeah.
How they handle playing against Purdue on the road. And I obviously I'm always looking for the win because we need wins.
Yeah.
But how they come out and play, really, how they come out and practice this week.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be any change. Just because you play in Iowa don't mean you practice physical just Iowa week.
Right.
See, that's where I was a little bit upset. Like
when they said that on Monday that they knew they had to be physical going into the game.
For?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You wear pads to hit people. That's what the football is. This is a combative sport. Mm-hmm. So how they play against Purdue, a good, well-oiled team, a physical team, a team that is going to challenge you.
Yeah, they're going to present some problems. That offense.
And their offense is going to present problems to our weakness on defense. And our weakness, in my opinion, on our defense is our safety play. Okay. It really is from a fundamental standpoint.
Fundamentals and pass coverage, which kind of go together. They go together,
right? Because when you got to, and I know I've worked when I played inside linebacker, you work hand in hand with a strong safety a lot of the times, and so when you're in defensive meetings, you know what they're looking at, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're coming down, and if they're running cover 4 or cover 3, and or even cover 1. And you're reading and you're looking through the tackle, the tight end, and you see high hat or he goes down, you got to check your guy, okay? But, the tight end's releasing and you're still in the backfield. That's fundamentals, right? And that's where Iowa beat us a couple times. And it's been something that's been going on all year. So what we need to do is just do our I want to see how fundamentally sound we can be because Purdue has 3 receivers that are dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course you hear about Bell and Moore. Mm-hmm. I think they got Williams is the other one, and they got another little receiver that's good. And they got that Xander, big fullback, look like Mike Allstead's little young brother.
Throwback, yeah.
Right? So we got a man up front, and so it's going to challenge us from a physicality standpoint because they try to be a physical team, even though they like to dink and dunk and throw it around. And then defensively, they play a bend but don't break with Bob Diaco, and
that is going to be a fascinating matchup.
It is.
Of what I'm looking for. The 2 big things we've already said them. The 2 big things I'm looking forward to this game is how Nebraska can adjust, and some of those crossing routes, especially that Purdue is coming. Like it's coming. Like I'm just. Right. We all know that, right? Like they're going to run those crossing routes with Bell and Moore and try to make Nebraska's linebacker and safety cover them in space and see what happens. And it's not going well for Nebraska. We'll see. But on the other side, Scott Frost basically versus Bob Diaco is just it would already have been an interesting matchup if Bob Diaco hadn't been here before. But it makes it even more fun, which is why it would have been so much more interesting though if it had been that season opener the way that it was supposed to be. And that's something that maybe can help the offense get going. But the danger, and this is what I don't like about what I've already heard, and I've seen this in like just media coverage of the game is, Nebraska's playing Bob Diaco's soft defense, so this is the magic elixir that Scott Frost and his offense needs. Uh-huh. No, that's not the way that they need to approach this game. It's the same thing that happened with Illinois. Nebraska cannot do that. I'm not saying that they are or they will, but Nebraska needs to tune that stuff out. Like, and I know that everybody loves to say that they don't pay attention to us. They definitely pay attention. And actually, it's funny because I think what Travis Fisher said this about Deontay Williams. They said they have to keep him away from reading stuff because he likes to read the stuff about himself, and we don't need that. Like nobody needs that this week because especially on that offense. Deontay's on defense, but especially on that offense because these games in this league are not ones that you can take for granted no matter who you're playing. You've already had that bite you with Illinois. Don't let it happen to you again in Purdue when you play them. I think Purdue opened up as a 1-point favorite, so basically a pick 'em there at home.
But and also you got to think just because like when Illinois was coming in, they were getting up 280 yards passing. Well, we ain't a passing team,
right? Those weaknesses for them need to match up with Nebraska's strength.
So until we can do what other teams do well on a consistent basis, let alone just do it in practice, don't show up and think that Purdue's just going to let you run up and down the field. They still got Division I athletes. They are going to come in with a ton of confidence because I guarantee you they're not by the majority of receivers that they got rolling out there for Nebraska. Purdue ain't backing off with them dudes.
And Purdue has beaten Nebraska 2 times in a row. They beat them both times with the Braun-Frost matchup. So there's no reason that Purdue will come. Purdue's looking at this saying, okay, we can use this to get right.
Spread. That's what they're thinking.
We could get right
against it. Nebraska
needs
to be like, we're going to go out there and right the wrong, and we're going to finish off this season with 2 W's, and then obviously in the crossover game. So it's a hard week for Nebraska, but I think it's a good week because you can coach a lot of positivity off this tape, off the results. Everything that I would be approaching it as like we lost that game. Iowa didn't beat us. Right. This is how we lost the game. We beat them And people were like, well, Iowa ran the ball better in the second half. So that's fine.
Yeah, and eventually that's what is going to happen when you play a team like
because
that.
Because Iowa's a good, well-coached, running football team with 2 legitimate Big Ten, Power 5.
Those 2 running backs are very good.
Very good. So they're going to be able to make it. And so, but then also I would say, okay, that's cool. They got it started a little bit, but then Nebraska adjusted and started to play better. So at the end of the day, coaching off this tape is a lot more positive than negative from a physicality standpoint and ability to adjust and also step up your intensity. Now, I would just be coaching, I guess, a negative off a little bit of it when, hey, look, we came out of halftime and scored. We spotted you 7 points defense. We didn't come out with enough intensity like we started the game, regardless of what Iowa does. Right. Iowa did. This was on us because our intensity level wasn't at their level or higher. It was below. And then we let them score. Now, granted, there was other plays in there. Obviously, there was a 3rd and 11. They got 16 yards, and that was one of the plays against Williams as far as like the crossing route that he should have been covering. But at the end of the day, that's on us, right? That's on us. Our intensity level has nothing to do with the scoreboard. Yep. We control that coming out of the locker room, especially after we get the momentum on the road. We should be thinking, well, next time we get in this situation, if we do this week at Purdue on the road, we have got to be able to shut the door. We can't give up 7 points. 3 at the worst is the worst thing we want to do. Ideally, get them to punt the ball. Then we turn that 7-point lead into a 10 or a 3-point lead into 6. If obviously, what you want to keep the lead and expand on it. So that's where I would focus on that, and then obviously just in the details because everybody's focusing on the drop punt, right? I'm focusing on whoever's working with the returners in the return game are missing the details. I played special teams every year in Nebraska all through my NFL career, right? So that's pretty much 4 years at Nebraska plus another 9. It's 13 years. Everybody's saying the first thing that they tell the punt returns and kick returns, you will not be back there until you got to catch the ball first before you think you're going anywhere. Right. And how you catch it, you get your body underneath it, and you kind of catch it like a cradle, right? Yep. Okay? You drop the punt because he was extended, try to catch it with his hands. But conversely, after they got that field goal, if you go back and look, Alante Brown caught the kickoff like this.
Oh, yeah, with his hands above his head.
Right?
Yeah.
So these are just the little details that a young team has to learn, but then also a young coaching staff has to harp on. Yep. Because it's not that you caught the ball. What I'm trying to eliminate is you dropping the ball when we need it the most. Right. Because what people don't understand, what I always think about sports, I call it the football gods or the sports gods. What you don't do fundamentally and you don't really take as serious always rears their ugly heads in the most inopportune time, whether it's a big game or a big moment. Right. It really does.
And you can just see it time after time with Nebraska. Like it happens all the time.
Right. So those are the little things that I'm going to talk on a negative, and those are under our control. Right. I would say there's nothing
to do with Iowa.
Nothing to do with Iowa. And Nebraska's biggest opponent is who? Nebraska. Yeah. At the end of the day, there's only one opponent that Nebraska is going to face every year that they got to worry about. That's Ohio State. Or not every year, but it's Ohio State. Yeah. Every other opponent is Nebraska. And so until we can beat Nebraska and get that tug of war to pull us into the good Nebraska, we got to get rid of the bad one. And I will also say this, that with as far as like Scott and his coaching staff, right? I'm not a big guy on trying to like can guys, right? Like this is a weird year. I'm more or less, let me see what you're going to do. Now, okay, look, this is a hard year, right? Okay, this is the lights are on in here, okay? Right. It was like when we walked in here and Sasha had half the lights on. All the lights are on, so all your ugly bumps and bruises are shown. Right. I want to see if you can remedy them together, right? That's number one. Number two is I want to see how we adjust moving forward after this year, considering how this year was. Because, you got the built-in excuse. Now I want to see how you come out of it, and then you can worry about, what you do in the future, because continuity is going to be key for these kids because you have such a young team, right? And here's how these kids probably think, I'm assuming, is if you start pulling the plug on coaches, you're going to be pulling plugs on players, then you're going to lose a little bit of that.
Right. Then we end up having who am I starting from ground zero with
again,
new position coach X.
Right. And then he teaches it a different way. And, you got to kind of, I guess, a new offensive passing game coordinator with a running game coordinator with an offensive-minded coach. So that needs to kind of get
to figure all that out.
You need a spring ball for that where you can come out and try it. You do. Yeah. To be honest with you. Hey, you call the plays today. Let's see how it goes. Sasha calls the plays today. Let's see how it goes. Then we'll do it. And then let's try to get together and find some, continuity there, right? Because if I'm a head coach in football, I'm a defensive-minded coach, right? So that's what I'm known for. So if I'm hiring you as a defensive coordinator, I have to come to the terms that I'm giving you this right here is you, and then I'm becoming like the defensive coordinator CEO. We're still hand in hand. I'm still looking at it, giving you some tips, but you calling it,
right? And
I'm giving you it, right? And so we just got to get a little bit. So those are the things I think you need to work through and get through, this year. But it's at this point in time, the wins and losses are huge. It's how you win or lose, but then also you have to you got to develop these guys. You got to get them out there, and there's still no excuses out there because there's 2 very, very winnable games out there. And if I had any advice for the athletic department, right, or the coaching staff, this is the time. And I would say you shouldn't be so bullheaded that you got your head in the sand, and when you're trying to, what I'm saying, and not take advice or use all your resources. But if you really believe in your coaching staff and your program and what you're doing overall, right?
Which they continue to say that he does. Like Scott continues to say,
this is when you pull harder, right? This is when you say, hey, look, we need to pull harder. Because the easy thing right now is relinquish a little bit of that pull and say, oh, what we did wasn't right. Let's just push reset. Let's pull harder, but we got to still adjust, right? If you want to look at somebody that I don't think is really adjusted everywhere he's go, that's Chip Kelly, right? He never adjusted in the NFL, right? Could start out hot and never really cut all the players and all his good players, all the Hall of Fame players. They are, you know what? I could just get anybody back there. Then he goes to UCLA, and it's kind of been suspect, even though he's had really, really good players there, right? I mean, he got a starting running back for the Chargers, and he barely wanted to run him,
right?
And he went second round, and he left early with a quote unquote injury. And had another first-round tackle for the Raiders, right? So you don't want to do that, but you still want to be able to adjust. You want to be able to be multiple, and that's one of the things that Nebraska needs to graduate to or gravitate to is even from quarter to quarter or half to half, right? You got to be able to adjust to give these guys more to learn, more to do, but then give them more tools to win a game on the road or just, finish a game better than they started, because there's not a lot of times now we're starting the games fast because you got to think back when Riley was here, they slept walk all the way through like 3 quarters and they turned it
was
on.
always a slow starting team.
Now we're starting fast and we're ending slow. So now we got to be able to do a little bit of both.
Yeah, definitely. And I think adjusting on the fly, I think is the big key. And I think that knowing the difference between pushing harder, whether or not that's doubling down on what you're doing as a staff, but doing it more intense, whether or not that's on the player's point of view of making sure that you're more detailed in your work, making sure that you continue as leaders on that team to hammer that people need to be doing things the right way on a consistent basis, because we are close and we're doing a lot of good things, but it still needs to go even further, which is a whole part of that whole learning how to win. I think that's a huge thing for the program, and it always feels better after wins. And that's why this week, like I said, with a couple of winnable games, if you can – if it would be just so big for the coaching staff to continue to keep the team together, get them pushing and pulling in the right direction, and then get a win against Purdue, and then say, okay, you get that win, but now we have to go even harder because we know what it takes and we know what happened the last time we get a win, and then you get that game against Minnesota. And I'm just thinking in my mind, and I just always think about things as opportunities, right? It's just a way that I look at the world. If you can go out and win against Purdue, follow that up with Minnesota, you get that crossover game and you can get that one. Think about how much differently people are thinking about this team going into the offseason, because then you're 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Even that, with being under 500, it would show something in a big way with growth of the program that they started off very shaky, and then they said, okay, we figured out how to right the ship on the fly, and then won some games on the back end. Like, they have the opportunity, and that's why I think, and I'll be curious to see what happens today. We record this on Monday, to see what happens today at the press conference and how guys look and how their kind of attitudes and mindsets are, because if they're locked in and they're a little bit pissed off, I think that's a really good thing going forward. And that tells me that they're not going to fold or falter like you maybe would have seen in previous years.
Right.
No, we're going to go ahead and finish up with my favorite segment every week. We're going to put them on blast.
Put them on blast.
So each week we put somebody on blast. We basically for something that they did or said. I think this is the first time that I've had to do a team. I have to do the Chicago Bears. Like, you didn't think I was going to. You looking, you were like, where is this going?
Yeah.
I had to do it. You know how, like, and I know this happened to you because it happened to me. When you were a kid and your parents told you not to embarrass them in front of company, not to act up in public, I feel like the Bears are always embarrassing me in front of company. Why is it that they get on Sunday Night Football and just get the brakes beat off of them? All the time, it feels like.
Right.
And then not only that, we got to compound it by having the loss be to the Packers, which they lost, was at 41-25 last night.
It was over before it started.
Oh, it was over. I'm trying to figure out at what point in that game was I like, no, this ain't. It was sometime in the second quarter where I was just like, no, this is not going on. They are consistently just embarrassing me. And I don't understand. Like, it's time, and I've said this to you before, it is time for Mitchell Trubisky to go. It's time for Matt Nagy to go. It's time for Ryan Pace to go. All of them. Yeah. All of them have to go. I don't understand what's happening here. Yeah. And it's probably it's messed up because now I feel like they've gotten to the point, because it was like, oh, okay, they just need to figure out enough on offense because they got this great defense. And now all of a sudden,
well, you know it's bad.
The defense
you know it's bad when Green Bay's like third team tight end was talking cash junk to Danny Trevathan.
Yeah.
And trying to punk him. So it's one of those. But I'm gonna tell you, from a defensive standpoint, I've been on those teams. When your offense is so bad, you just get worn out, man.
Yeah, and then eventually you knew that was going to happen.
And you playing against Aaron Rodgers. You playing one of the best offenses in the
Who's
league.
Been on fire.
He's
been on fire.
And you out there and you looking over and you see Mitchell Trubisky roll out there and you see the offense. I mean, he was.
I don't know what he sees. Like, I don't.
He's seeing a lot of ghosts right now. He's got a lot of demons, but that offensive line was getting bum rushed.
Yeah.
And Green Bay Packers can't stop the run, but they can rush the Packers, or they can rush the passer, and it was hard. It's
hard to watch.
It's hard to watch, and you know, sometimes in those games in the NFL, you just get got, man. And Green Bay was ready, and they made a statement. And they beat the brakes off Chicago.
Yeah, it's time for everybody to go. Like, we gotta, like, all.
That's how you get fired. I mean,
that is how it happens, because it's funny, because you would think that they would not. Yeah, I did. You would think, and was it Jacksonville fired their GM?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, right. Actually, think it's funny because I thought that, like, kind of everything with COVID would keep guys from getting fired, whether it was NFL or college. And so far, especially in NFL, like, I forgot about him already.
He was 0-8. That was just a matter of time.
Yeah, because they got Vanderbilt, South Carolina, of course, the SEC. Right. 2 SEC jobs have come open in season. And I'm sure there'll be a couple more.
There's always those surprise fire. There's one or two in the NFL. Somebody gets fired out of.
Yeah, it's always a surprise.
Yeah. And then college, I wouldn't say it's a firing, or he
somebody just leaves
and then goes somewhere else or something like that. So it's about that time.
Yeah, the NFL is
the holidays.
Yeah, but I thought Nagy would be safe because I think he got an extension and got new coaching staff around him, coordinators. Right. So I thought he would, but these are the types of games that end up canceling that out because it's bad enough that it's on Sunday Night Football. It's against your rival. You just can't have that.
Right.
Like, and I think that they're on some real
Matt
thin
Nagy's
ice.
going to keep his job. He's going to have to go around Ryan Pace to the ownership and saying, bring a GM in here and be a lame duck coach for a year. Because they have Chuck Pagano, a great defensive coordinator, good offensive coordinator. And I think Chicago obviously needs more offensive threats for his offense to be good. Yeah. But he has no quarterback. And that's on Pace. You know, that's who he wanted, right? I mean, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Yeah, okay, fine. They took Mitchell Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes. And we got to call him Patrick. Mahomes and
Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, who they actually would not meet with. They did not meet
willingly, though. They willingly did it.
They did that on purpose. That happened on purpose. Yeah. I still sometimes think about that, though. Like, I would love to see the alternate universe in which, like, the Bears take Mahomes and then the Chiefs get Trubisky. And see just how different Trubisky's
the Chiefs ain't no Super
career
Bowl
goes. I mean, I don't think they're a Super Bowl team, but I think he would be. But I think he would be better because Andy Reid is a good really good coach. Yeah,
but I don't really necessarily think so because Nagy.
But he's also just so bad.
Nagy is a Andy Reid disciple. I think Alex Smith is still in Kansas City. Yeah, starting
maybe that. And Patrick Mahomes, right now I'm wearing my Patrick Mahomes jersey, Bears jersey.
They'd be dominating the NFC Central, but they wouldn't be in the Super Bowl contention. They just don't have any receivers.
Yeah, they're still not. Yeah, it's not the same as what he got. But you saw it this weekend with Tyreek Hill.
24s have nightmares.
Goodness.
On the Buccaneers.
Yeah. Brady was looking washed out there, man.
He woke up a little bit, but Bruce Arians is not. Bruce Arians is the type of coach or coordinator that he is going to try to shove his offensive system down.
And that was always the worry, right? When they made that pairing, would he try to make that a vertical passing game or keep it a vertical passing game?
And they don't have
with Brady
the type of assets you need. So to stay in the NFL, who I'm going to put on blast, somebody I have a little bit of working relationship or had a working relationship with, I'm putting on. They kind of go hand in hand, right? So I'm putting on the Denver Broncos and Vic Fangio and the three quarterbacks in that quarterback room. I'm putting them all on blast, right? So the story is that if you didn't know, that the Denver Broncos had one guy get COVID, it was Driscoll.
Yeah.
They have three other quarterbacks, one practice squad guy and two guys that were on the active roster. They all chose not to follow the NFL protocols and not wear masks. Not only did they not do it, knowing that the NFL had cameras all in the quarterback room, they chose to lie about it, not once, but twice. That's like the feds coming to your house and say, hey, we got something on you, and you deny it, you come back again, right? Wolf of Wall Street. Could you stop doing this so you can stay out of jail? No, I'm going to stay, right? So the NFL said, I'm going to teach you a lesson. We're not going to give you an extra day.
They did not
push the game back.
No.
You got pretty much 24 hours to find you a quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, they got a practice squad quarterback or a practice squad receiver that played quarterback at Wake Forest a few years ago. He had to start in an NFL game against the Saints.
That's tough, man.
Now to double down on it, right?
Yeah.
The Saints end up winning 31-7, right? So now I'm going up to the upper level. That's the players. Now I'm going to the coach. Now, Vic Fangio's quote is this: I was disappointed in our quarterbacks that they put us in this position. Our quarterbacks also put the league in that position to make that decision. We count on them to be leaders of the team, and they made a mistake, and that's disappointing. Okay?
Yeah.
So now you essentially told on yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you had to know about this, because if you're a head coach, you have to be in tune with the quarterback coach and know that whether they're walking around the whole facility, these guys said they were walking around with no mask like
the whole time.
Like the whole time.
Okay.
On camera. Right?
Smart.
You the head coach during COVID, after the NFL had doubled down on their protocols.
Yeah, because they had a wide number of cases. Yeah.
Right. So the Denver Broncos, as an organization, already had gone through this, because Vic Fangio, when he were on Sunday Night Football, got fined for not wearing a mask. Right? So you already know you're on the NFL is going to come back and watch you again. So now that starts up at top, right? From John Elway on down to Vic Fangio, now down to the players. The players probably see the coaches, and the coaches are like, okay, I can do whatever I want. Now the whole scheme of things. There's a unwritten rule in the NFL. You never put your players or your coaches or especially your players, and a coach never calls you out like that.
Yeah.
So that just lets you know that I'm assuming come in January, that's going to be one of the firings right there, because that's something that you do. Because if you want your players to play for you, no matter what they do, you protect them.
Yeah, you do. You don't throw them under the bus.
If you want them to find a reason not to play for you, call them out on that stuff. Even though that they were wrong, you deal with it internally, right? You deal with them internally. And also you deal with them internally like, look, man, you explain it to them. This isn't just about you playing for the Broncos. I'm going to Vic Fangio is going to coach somewhere.
Yeah.
Now you're out there knowing that you don't have any leadership skills. You get what I'm saying? Luck.
So this is about even if you end up somewhere else.
Now,
this
was your opportunity here.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's bigger than this, right? And so it's almost a teaching lesson. But then also, with Vic Fangio as an old school coach, you can't be having these young guys out here. You can't coach a young team like you do with the older veteran team and calling guys out. That's what's just. I got to put them on blast, because from the top down, right? That was just horrible. It's a bad weekend, and then they were like, "Oh, well, they made an example." No, you made an example of yourself.
No, you did that to yourself.
You did it to yourself. It started with the players, or it started with up top, coaches, and then went down to the players.
Yeah, that was a bad one. They definitely deserve to be put on blast. I thought we were going to go with Dabo again, because he was still being a jackass, even though Florida State has now played, like, they've had the next 2 or 3 games canceled since that happened. But it's all right. I'm going to leave Dabo alone for right now.
We got to give Dabo's like –
they just got a lifetime pass.
Dabo is a weekly candidate, But you got to get. I'm gonna tell you, if Dabo was third, Broncos were number one. The two coming in close to the first place was the Baltimore Ravens weight coach.
Okay, yeah, they had their own. They had their own.
We could do a whole segment. Homeboy said, "You know what? I'm the weight coach, but once I leave here, I don't believe in COVID."
Yeah,
and then brought COVID in and just infected the whole team. And they had
a whole including Lamar Jackson.
The franchise player here. So when you go home tonight and you see your wife and you say, "Hey, honey, you know how much I hated COVID." But I hate COVID so much that I am about to get fired.
Yeah, like
at the end of the year.
Because those are the things now. You do stuff that gets you fired. Like you
not getting fired. You getting blackballed off the league. You're gonna be the weight coach at like Mount Union State here.
We got to put a pin in that one to make sure that we come back and follow up with his story because that's gonna be fascinating to see. But that'll do it for this.
You could go to Iowa though, maybe.
See,
always got to be petty. Always got to be petty.
Petty Pat again. Subscribe to this podcast everywhere you listen to them. Rate us, review us, leave us a 5-star review. If you only leave 4, I'm inclined to think you're a hater, and nobody wants that. Make sure you're checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network. Mind Your Own Varsity Club, More to It, and the Hail Varsity Radio Show. You can also email us at straightupbreakdown@hailvarsity.com, and you can check us out on Twitter at GregSmithHV and at Foreman5644. We will catch you next time.